The Southern Ocean is estimated to store about 75% of the global oceanic uptake of excess heat and about 35% of the excess carbon dioxide from human emission into the atmosphere. It is the primary storage mechanism for heat and carbon for the planet. The Southern Ocean interconnects the Pacific, Indian, and Atlantic Oceans to allow the worldwide distribution of heat, salt, dissolved gases, and nutrients, and this is vitally important in driving global ocean circulation and climate. CSIR scientists from the Southern Ocean Carbon Climate Observatory, or SOCO, have now published research that looks at how part of this mechanism works, how storms drive outgassing of carbon dioxide in the Southern Ocean.
What we see, or what we've observed in our study, is that storms are able to really drive exceptionally deep mixing to the point that they can go down to 150 meters depth and access this reservoir of carbon that's old and hasn't been utilized. And when they tap into that reservoir of carbon, they bring it up into the ocean mix layer, and that changes the concentration of carbon in the ocean mix layer, which results in an outgassing flux of carbon into the atmosphere. Storms not only drive deep mixing, but storms also drive an advective response, so they drive ocean circulation. And what we see is that these storms, because they occur very frequently, they drive a lot of variability in the carbon in the ocean mix layer. And so why it's important to understand this variability is because typically we make observations at a very low frequency. So we take a ship down to the Southern Ocean, we make some observations, and that happens once a year. So if we're not properly measuring this high frequency variability, we're potentially impacting our observations through aliasing. So we're potentially having false means. And this is really important because, as I said, the Southern Ocean plays a critical role in the global carbon budget. And so really understanding and quantifying its role is critical.
South Africa, through SOCO, has a research focus on the Southern Ocean and its influence on the global carbon climate system. This track record and the research breakthroughs are also built on collaborations with local and international bodies.
We've had a lot of support from our local partnerships, such as Sea Technology Services, which has really helped to support our robotics lab that we've set up, and also important investments from the Department of Science and Innovation to really help us build this infrastructure that we need to ask these really difficult questions.
The research relied heavily on novel high-resolution observations from ocean robotics experiments that are designed to withstand the hostile conditions of the Southern Ocean, which include regular storms with winds of up to 140 kilometers per hour. These ocean robotic instruments are equipped with control units that enable remote steering, communications, and the sending of real-time data. They are for the ocean what satellites are for Earth observations, and they are increasingly integrated.
In order to do this research, we had to invest in different types of ocean robots to answer different types of questions, and together to answer integrated questions. And so we've invested in this platform here, which is a Slocum glider. It's a buoyancy-driven glider, and it dives down to 1,000 meters depth, and it basically does yo-yos through the water column. And it has different types of sensors on it that are able to provide information every time it hits the surface. So we're able to, for example, understand how warm or salty the ocean is. This particular glider has another sensor on it, which is this that you see on top. This is a turbulence package. It has different types of probes on here that allow us to measure really fine-scale overtones that are occurring in the ocean. And from that we can derive mixing. So we can understand, we can directly measure how much mixing a storm is inflicting on the ocean.
We make atmospheric and surface ocean measurements to understand how the two are actually responding to each other. Okay, so you can see we're making measurements in the top half a meter of water and in the atmosphere. The main instrument in the water is the two of them, but the main one is the one that sits under here, which is measuring CO2 in the surface ocean. This was actually an instrument that was actually designed and built here in South Africa, here at our engineering robotics facility. And so it's a fully home design. In fact, we're now starting to sell it internationally because it really is performing extremely well. What makes the data from this unit valuable is the data from the other unit, and what makes the data from the other unit valuable is this data here. So the two together are really what provides the insight that we need about how the ocean and the atmosphere exchange CO2 and heat.
The current global warming of 1 degree Celsius is already causing observed impacts in our regional climate, especially in growing climate extremes, with negative outcomes for human and environmental health, as well as economic development risks. Sea levels are rising, and oceans are becoming warmer as well as more acidified. Longer, more intense droughts threaten food security, biodiversity, and freshwater supplies. These emerging realities explain why understanding and predicting the Southern Ocean and its ability to continue to serve as a carbon and heat sink is key to the confidence in mitigation and adaptation measures in support of a just transition in South Africa and for the planet as a whole.
The carbon budget doesn't exist in isolation. The carbon cycle is coupled to climate. So we talk about carbon-climate links. So carbon, so it's the CO2 that we emit, the part that remains in the atmosphere is what traps the radiation, the warming, creates the warming of the atmosphere, and that warming is what drives climate change. And then climate change then has a feedback effect on the terrestrial and ocean sinks. So the carbon budget is an important part of understanding the past, present, and future trajectories of climate.
The research on how storms drive carbon dioxide outgassing is a new study, and it is the first to explain the mechanisms that make storms important in predicting the Southern Ocean under different climate change scenarios. The CSIR and its strategic partners will continue exploring and communicating the outcomes of its research on how storms are influencing the flux of carbon and heat in the region.